evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
You might need to go out of your comfort zone. Just try it once, see if you like it, see if it's that big of a deal.
Honestly, it feels amazing to be back in person, and it's a bonus we get to be with our friends and family.
People will be curious. They're gonna say, what is that about? What's going on?
Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a look at electric bikes cruising the streets of Windsor. There's no doubt they are good for the environment, but in these inflationary times, will they save you money? Our Jennifer Lagrassa looked into the cost of e-bikes versus cabs, and what she found may surprise you.
Bird Canada launched the e-scooter last year in the city. After that, they brought in these e-bikes. Now, there's about 100 of them on the streets. These bikes go up to 20 kilometers an hour, and you can only ride them in a certain area of the city. That's from Riverfront up to Tecumseh Road, and then Drouillard Road all the way to Prince Road. Right now, I am on the Riverfront, and I'm headed to Walkerville. But how does my trip in this cab compare? Is it any cheaper taking the e-bike? Okay, so I've arrived at my destination, Wyandotte Street East and Lincoln Road. Now, the Bird e-bikes cost $1.15 to unlock and activate your ride, and then another 42 cents per minute. It took me about 21 minutes to get to Walkerville. Here's the cost comparison. Using the e-bike cost me a total of $11.86. For about the same distance, the cab cost $12, without a tip for the driver. If you're with a group, the cab ride would be cheaper. Is it an option, or is it something that you would do if you're choosing between a cab or an e-bike?
I think depending on the weather, yes. Mainly because you are still helping the environment, and I've seen not really a ton of the e-bikes, but I know we have a lot of like the e-scooters downtown that people ride around on, and they always look like they're a lot of fun to ride on.
They do help you get from one point. It doesn't take as long, but as you go by the minute, the money, like the cost of it does go up a lot, so.
I would think that an electric bike would be cheaper to run and a cab would be more with the price of gas these days.
One environmental advocate says it's a no-brainer that people should lean in to e-bikes.
Biking, especially with e-bikes, it does not require much effort of you. It clearly doesn't change the cost between it and a cab. It's better for you to interact with the environment and to kind of liven up your world. And the world around you, the city around you. Maybe it's not the best, but it's a start. And you gotta start riding the start line to get to the finish line.
Bird Canada, the e-scooter and e-bike company, told CBC News in an email that the cost of its electric devices in Windsor is among the lowest in North America. It also said it is difficult to compare e-bikes to taxis when taxis are affected by traffic and e-bikes generally aren't, so the time to get to the same destination is not the same. Bird Canada also said it offers heavily discounted passes for frequent riders. Jennifer Lagrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
And the public has voted, and 3 of Windsor's roads are among the 5 worst roads in southwestern Ontario. That's according to a survey by the Canadian Automobile Association, which took a look at the worst roads in the province. It identified Lauzon Parkway, University Avenue West, and Tecumseh Road East to be bumpy rides. And it's not the first time they've made the worst roads list. Grad is back. This morning, St. Clair College students attended their first graduation ceremony after 2 years of virtual convocations. About 3,500 students from the college's Windsor and Chatham campuses will have the opportunity to walk across the stage and receive their diplomas. Our video producer Darren DiCarlo spoke with some of the new grads who were thrilled to have the real-world experience.
Honestly, it feels amazing to be back in person, and it's a bonus we get to be with our friends and family. It feels amazing.
It feels really good, just like after such a long experience and so much hard work, it's really nice to be able to celebrate this in person and not over a screen.
Good, I feel like they're proud of me because of how far I've come. I be honest, I didn't think I was going to make it, but you know, we push ourselves through to get to where we need to be. Because online, it kind of pushed us not to break out of our boundaries because we were all behind a computer and we couldn't talk to each other.
Tell me a little bit how difficult the journey was with all the pandemic and learning from home and, you know, online classic. How was that like?
At the start, the online, it's not for me personally. That's why I'm a hands-on student, so I'd rather be in class. And then once it switched in class, it was a great experience.
Now that Premier Doug Ford has won his second straight majority, he has 4 years to make good on his re-election promises. So what are the major pledges Ford will need to keep? Our Queen's Park senior reporter Mike Crawley has the highlights.
Workers in hard hats as a backdrop. That was a common theme for Doug Ford's campaign appearances.
We've supported the hardworking women and men in this province, the union members, we always have. I love them.
Another theme? Election promises that were a little vague on the details.
Rebuilding Ontario's economy with better jobs and bigger paychecks.
For instance, Ford pledged his re-elected Progressive Conservative government will build Highway 413 across the northwestern part of the GTA, but refused to give even a ballpark price tag.
We're going out for a bid process, and once we get the bid process, we'll have a better idea what it's cost.
Some Ford promises do have numbers attached, such as hiring thousands more doctors, nurses, and personal support workers.
It's time to get it done for the nurses and PSWs who want to work in Ontario.
The PCs promise to create 30,000 new long-term care spaces by 2028 and ensure 1.5 million new homes get built in the next decade. There's also a promise to keep housing costs down, although Ford never quite said what down means. Campaigning in London, he met these families and said they're priced out of owning a home.
I told him, I gave him my word, that we'll stop at nothing to make sure we address the housing crisis in Ontario.
Ford's housing action plan actually stopped short of quite a few things that his own expert panel recommended, including more density in neighborhoods of single-family homes. The most immediate promises Ford needs to fulfill? Cutting the gas tax on July 1st by nearly 6 cents a litre, and passing a budget that's nearly identical to the one his finance minister tabled in late April. One change the PCs will have to make to that budget, Ford promised during the campaign to increase Ontario disability support payments by 5%. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
The federal banking regulator sent mystery shoppers to branches of Canada's big banks to see how they sell their products and services. They found that racialized and Indigenous customers are more often pitched inappropriate products. The undercover survey was prompted in part by a Go Public investigation into high-pressure sales tactics. Erica Johnson explains.
It started when these 3 TD Bank employees told Go Public they had to upsell customers to meet sales targets and keep their jobs.
Customers deserve to know what's being done to them at their institution.
Soon, more than 3,000 current and former employees from all the big banks had written, describing a high-pressure sales culture. The banking regulator promised to conduct a mystery shopper survey, the first of its kind in Canada. It sent people posing as customers into more than 700 branches across the country. A key finding, 32% of secret shoppers who identified as visible minority or Indigenous were pitched overdraft protection with monthly fees and accrued interest, almost double other shoppers. 13% were offered credit card balance protection insurance, which often doesn't pay out, much higher than other shoppers.
They're making this assumption that Black, racialized, and Indigenous people are more likely to default or overextend themselves.
Shoppers also reported a big push on premium credit cards with higher fees that typically require a minimum income. But in 80% of cases, customers were not asked about their income.
Banks are going to push people to the highest cost items, even if they don't need it, because they make more profits that way.
The regulator says more can be done by banks to protect customers from concerning sales practices, like ensuring frontline staff are effectively trained.
We should actually be thinking about why is it that there is so much pressure for them to sell? That it actually compromises the bank's integrity and commitment to taking care of the financial health of Canadians.
New rules for the banks come into effect at the end of this month in an attempt to make sure customers are only offered products and services they need. Meantime, we continue to hear from bank employees who say the pressure to sell remains strong. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Russia is putting more troops into eastern Ukraine as it gets closer to one of its key goals. Moscow says it now controls almost all of Luhansk, one of two breakaway republics in the eastern Donbass region. Intense fighting is reported in the city of Lysychansk. It sits on a strategic river, and the area has been the target of unrelenting Russian bombardment. Ukrainian officials say their forces are keeping the Russians at bay, but the fighting is turning the area into a dead zone. An ongoing Russian blockade of ports has all but stopped grain exports from Ukraine. Millions of tons of grain are backed up inside the country. This year's harvest is coming, and there's no place to put it. Ukraine and its allies are struggling to get shipments out to the rest of the world. CBC's Margaret Evans has more.
The ordered rows of farmland in southwest Ukraine, so at odds with the chaos of a country under siege. In one of the world's great breadbaskets, it should offer a sense of comfort, fields of wheat just starting to deepen in color. Instead, the coming harvest carries with it a sense of crisis. The Petrodolinska Agricultural Farm. It's home to about 700 head of cattle and around 1,000 hectares of land. Cattle feed mixed in-house is not a problem. Storing wheat headed for world markets is. Because some of the grain from previous harvests is still here, says the farm's chief technologist, while the next one is right around the corner. But with Ukraine's major ports blocked by Russia, experts say more than 20 million tons of harvested grain is stuck, with serious implications for global hunger. Efforts to ship by road and rail have been hampered by logistical problems.
It's a nightmare.
Freight expert Oleg Kostyuk says the will is there, but not the capacity.
Small ports on Danube River, it might be another solution. But even though if everything will work well, road, railroad and Danube River ports, we will be able to export like 2, maybe 3 million tons.
Not nearly enough. And critics accuse Russia of weaponizing hunger. It's led to calls for a safe corridor through the Black Sea, where a handful of mines have recently washed ashore. The Russians have used anchor mines, says Oleksandr Kovalenko. They're more or less stationary, and anti-mine ships would need a month or two to make a corridor through them. And a great deal of political will. Farmer Ihor Shumeko is doubtful. Western countries have the fleet to do it, he says, but the Russians won't go for it. They want to keep us down, politically and psychologically. All this in a corner of Ukraine where farmers don't have to worry about daily shelling in the fields, at least not yet. Time is slipping away here, like grain in an hourglass. Margaret Evans, CBC News, near Odessa.
There is a broad shortage of workers across Canada. Many companies are complaining that their job postings are going unfilled. It's particularly true in Quebec, and employers there are using a loophole in the labor laws in an effort to solve the problem. CBC's Alison Northcott reports.
At this canteen, the youngest employee is just 11. The owner says not everyone is ready to work at that age, but says some are and are eager to. They have homework and final exams, says Pascal Lamarche, but they make it work and can get time off when they need it. With Quebec desperately short of workers, the province's labor minister says some employers are turning to younger people to fill their job needs. There's no minimum age to work in Quebec, but shifts can't interfere with school, and children under 14 need written permission from their parents.
Since I was little, I always wanted to get a job.
Leah Mercier is 15 and says she's worked every summer since 6th grade as a babysitter, a dog groomer, and in an art supply store.
Learning that confidence and learning how to set your boundaries with your bosses and coworkers is really good at a young age, because you're setting yourself up for success later on.
Statistics Canada doesn't break down labor data for workers under 15. BC recently raised its minimum working age from 12 to 16.
The actual economic context, the shortage in terms of workers.
This lawyer says with so many businesses eager to find workers, Quebec needs better protections for the youngest ones.
The younger they are, the more difficult it is to manage stressful situations such as productivity pressure or situation like sexism as well.
I'm extremely worried.
The Labour Minister says employers have legal responsibilities when it comes to young workers, but he's looking at improvements.
If we have to legislate to better, to make sure that the younger workers have a better supervision, I will do that.
There will also be training for employers to ensure young people are working reasonable hours in safe environments. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Art is helping members of the LGBTQ community explore their identity. Local artist Derek Bizzo is working on a text-based art installation based on key moments in LGBTQ history. It'll be up on a billboard at the Arts Council Windsor and Region headquarters later this month. Arash Tashetty spoke with Bizzo about the convergence of history and identity in their art.
The one that I start with, 1842. I started to pull these important dates that talk about this difficult history, right? The first date alludes to the military occupation by colonial forces of Indigenous lands and the persecution of those military agents for their acts of sodomy, right? And so our history really starts with persecution. I wanted to use the text-based work to bring attention to that history, how both long and short it is, as well as talk about some really important events that happened here in Windsor more particularly, and in the recent past, some really important developments, some heroes that we can name and the fights that they've been taking on to bring about a more free future, such as John Damien, who was fired from his job being openly gay, and then brought that to a court challenge, and although didn't win, did move things forward, right? And what I'm challenged by now is just trying to really make those final choices because I'm so limited with the space on that billboard. I'm so limited. And so it is getting sort of flattened, right? The layers of history are being flattened and compressed, and there's erasure happening. People will be curious. They're gonna say, what is that about? What's going on? I think I know what that is. I'm gonna Google it. That's the hope, is people are going to engage with the work because they don't know really what's going on. It's not that obvious, right? I have gone to visit the billboard and I've looked at it and I said, oh, like it's this big and I think I could fit this many letters. You know, this is gonna change things. So that's been interesting. I have tried to have a more embodied experience of the project. I don't want to just sit on my computer to make it so much. I really like the three, you know, the world. But that's been interesting, is that it's been really like in my head, writing things down, reading and writing, typing it out. It's been a very computer-based project.
Live look outside there. After all that rain overnight, conditions should be clearing up tonight, but we do have a slight chance of showers once again for tomorrow. Dahlia Ashry will be here after the break with more. Dahlia Ashtrey is here now for a look at our weather forecast. Dahlia, today we had a bit of a reprieve from that rain, but looks like we got to brace ourselves for tomorrow again.
That's right, Katerina. You guys had a bit of a dry commute to work, but tomorrow it's about to be a wet commute to work again. But let's start off with the normal highs for this time of year is usually 25 degrees. Windsor sitting just a bit above that today, 27 degrees. The normal low, 14, and today's low is sitting above that mark as well at 18 degrees. Windsor 22 degrees today, a bit on the warmer side compared to the rest of southern Ontario. As you could see, Sarnia 18, London 18, Kitchener 15. And with that humidity today, it did feel like 25 degrees. So it was a bit warmer today, and it's going to feel like that going into tomorrow as well. But first, let's talk about that precipitation that's making its way out. As you can see currently, it's making its way out and away. But as we head into tomorrow, we're going to see the clouds starting to peek through here at about 8 a.m. And that's when you get a little bit of that precipitation coming through. You see that activity going through all the way till Thursday at 8 a.m. It will make its way out and it starts to just clear up just a smidge as you head into Thursday at 6 p.m. Overnight, it will be 9 degrees today, and that is all across the board, London as well. And as you take a look at your 5-day forecast, Wednesday, tomorrow, 20 degrees, low 13. Thursday, you get that lovely break, sitting at 23 degrees with that lovely sunshine. And then we get those wet conditions again as we head into the weekend. 20 degrees on Saturday, 60% chance of rain, low 14. Sunday, that sunshine again, 24 degrees and a low of 15. Katerina.
Thanks so much for that, Dahlia.
Thanks, Katerina.
When we come back, we're going to take a look at environmental footprints in healthcare. Stay with us. Welcome back. Canada's healthcare system is responsible for about 5% of greenhouse gas emissions in the country. And hospital operating rooms leave a disproportionate environmental footprint. CBC's Belle Puri has the story about how some health professionals are trying to make a change.
It's unlikely that while in surgery, patients contemplate climate change, but efforts to curb hospital greenhouse gas emissions do start in the operating room.
We really only have two choices for gases for keeping you asleep. They're actually both bad greenhouse gases.
One, however, is 25 times harder on the environment than the other. Consider the carbon footprint of desflurane during 1 2-hour surgery.
It would be the same as if you and I got in an SUV and drove up to Kamloops. Whereas the other option really is like a short trip just locally.
The other option, sevoflurane, is now the only option here at Royal Columbian Hospital and Port Moody's Eagle Ridge Hospital. All desflurane vaporizers have been removed from the operating rooms and shipped back to their manufacturer.
It doesn't take much anesthetic to put someone under. Only 5% of the gas actually is absorbed by the patient. The other 95% goes right into the atmosphere.
Sevoflurane lingers there for a year. Desflurane lingers for 14.
It is a small step. It's an important step in the context of healthcare, and it represents this growing movement of healthcare providers and other professionals looking out for climate impacts.
The University Health Network in Toronto has implemented technology to capture anesthetic gas the patient doesn't absorb and then sends it to be recycled. A Sudbury hospital stopped using desflurane almost 3 years ago. The doctor behind that move says it's time for government to step up.
That if you apply the current carbon pricing mechanism in Canada to these agents, desflurane would no longer be competitive and hospitals probably just wouldn't buy it, and that would be the forcing function of just removing desflurane.
There's no difference to the patient between the gases. The popularity of desflurane, doctors say, has been mostly due to marketing. But as they become more and more aware of its environmental impact, the easiest solution is to just not use it.
We're the largest anesthesia group in the country to take this sort of step.
Belle Puri, CBC News, New Westminster.
And that is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, you can always go to our website. Just go to cbc.ca/Windsor. And of course, you can also find us on social media as well. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The Rick Mercer Report is up next. Thanks for watching and have a great night.